Welcome to the Hunt Backcountry podcast. This is episode number 516, and our guests, Ben and Lily, are listeners of the show who had an amazing story to share from a once-in-a-lifetime mountain goat hunt in Idaho. Lily was the hunter, and she ended up taking a record book billy. Ben had also previously had this tag, and so we talk about his hunt a little bit, how they used that information to help Lily with her hunt, but it actually ended up being a different plan in a different area and an unexpected hunt in some ways. But the results were amazing. As I said, Lily was able to harvest a record book billy, which ended up scoring 50 6/8. So for Boone and Crockett, it's the 10th largest goat ever taken in Idaho, which is absolutely amazing. I always love fun listener stories. I love mountain goats. I enjoy sharing the female perspective with hunting. And so this is just an absolute great podcast. If you have any questions for us, or maybe you have a listener story, let us know. Send an email to podcast@exomountaingear.com. As draw results and hunt plans are coming out for 2025, maybe let us know if you have something interesting to share for a future before and after the hunt episode, as we will do more of those this year. Right now, though, enjoy this conversation with Ben and Lily. All right. Well, Ben, Lily, welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to chat with you guys. I just absolutely love mountain goats. So any mountain goat story is always fun. We always also get great feedback on anytime we can include more women on the podcast as well, because it's obviously, you start talking hunting and things tend to be male dominated, and then we always just get outstanding feedback and requests for more female perspectives. So that's always fun. So you put those two things together, it's gonna be a great episode. I am going to start with you though, Ben, because you are the one that first reached out to me. So first introduce yourself, and then maybe why you reached out about doing this podcast.
No, 100%. No, thanks for having us on. And I have to admit, we had to pregame a little bit, watch your experience project video, which was got us pumped up to talk about goats today. You guys are putting out some really good material, and that's a huge reason too for just wanting to be on your podcast specifically. We've been a huge fan for a long time. I've had an Exo pack for a long time. It's been
Cool.
my one of my favorite pieces of gear I've ever owned. So, but all that aside, I think the reason we wanted to reach out is we had a really special opportunity to hunt goats. I think it's unique that Lily and I have actually both had this same tag within 5 years of each other.
Wow.
And so I was successful as well, but Lily's obviously blows mine out of the water in terms of size. We had an incredible hunt. After the hunt, we knew this was like a really special billy. We've been watching it since July. Lily was able to take it, but we didn't really know how big. I think both myself and our friends were encouraging Lily, hey, you should get this professionally scored. And when we did, we found out that, that made the all-time record book for Boone and Crockett, puts her, around 13th biggest goat ever taken in the state of Idaho, which is incredible, and super proud of her. And I was like, man, this is a story I think that's worth sharing. Female hunter, obviously getting a goat that's in the record book. So yeah, we're excited to tell the story.
What is your background, Lily? I mean, you can share background in hunting. I
Yeah.
don't want to skip over that, but also I always find it interesting with these Idaho trophy opportunities and the once in a lifetime species. You can choose as a Idaho resident to put in for deer and elk hunts. You can go towards the once in a lifetime species, which for people who are
Right.
unaware is going to be mountain goat, moose, and sheep. But you can't put in for all of them. So you do have to make this proactive decision of what do I actually want to enter the draw
Right.
for? So I partially want to hear like how consistently you had been putting in for mountain goat, or maybe why mountain goat. But again, if you want to back up even further and talk about any
Yeah,
hunting history, that'd
sure.
be
I
great
don't know if you
as
do
well.
want to hear this.
I'll tell you in a second, but yeah, so backing up a little bit, just kind of brief overview. I grew up down in the Treasure Valley in Idaho and grew up with a dad that did a lot of like upland bird hunting. And so that was kind of my background, but not really big game at all. And so we definitely I did fly fishing, bird hunting, and, familiar with the outdoors, grew up camping, everything like that. So none of that was kind of new to me. But it actually wasn't until I started dating Ben and I kind of tagged along on a couple of his cow hunts in, I think that was 2016 and 20 no, it was 2015 and
2015,
2016. Yeah.
2016.
And tagged along with him on a couple of cow hunts. No idea what to expect. It was just like, I'm just going to go hiking with you and just follow along, and that uh, really interested me initially. And it was kind of one of those things where I was just doing it for the fun and like the adventure and the hike. And then once I kind of got to go through that whole hunt with him and kind of minimally, help out with the animal once it was on the ground, that kind of stemmed an interest. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then we get to bring it home and we get to fill up the freezer. And, you're coming full circle from the time you're scouting until the time that animal is in your freezer. And I think that really drove me into more of an interest. And then I started big game hunting in 2017. I shot a bear and 2 deer that year. And then got my first elk in 2018. And I've shot 5 elk in the last 7 seasons. And so, and I have been putting in for an apex species, actually California bighorn, since let's see, for I think for a couple years I put in for that. And because for those that don't know, Idaho doesn't have a point system, so if you don't put in, you don't draw. And so with that, there's really no penalty for me to switch apex species. And I was putting in, like I said, for California bighorn, and then it was like, oh, maybe I'll do something different this year. And that kind of brings me back to the point that Ben was saying about why people might not want to hear this. But I was actually to go pick up put in for my tag this last year, or put in for the draw. I'm in line at North 40, and I was like, I've been putting in for bighorn, and I just, I might do something different this year. I'm literally in line. And I'm like, I'm either going to put in for North Idaho moose or I'm going to put in for goat. And I'd never put in before. And so I was literally in line, like making a decision at the store. And then just on a whim was like, yep, I'm just going to put in for goat. And just kind of forgot about it because there's 3 tags in the unit that I hunted in. It's like a 2% draw. I'm like, I'm not going to draw this, but whatever, put in, and just kind of forgot about it until the results came out.
It's so funny with me with hunters because we all complain about point systems and stuff and preference points and bonus points and it takes forever. But then on the flip side of that, we also can't complain when this happens, right? Like the
Right,
pure
right,
luck of the draw. I would rather have that, right? On one hand, you could apply for 20 years into a random draw and never
right,
have your name pulled. On the other hand, you could have to waste 20 years and usually a lot more money to try and even remotely have a chance, right? So I love
right.
it. Yeah, the first time it happens.
Yep. Yeah, we were joking about it because we were like, we got to put in for something else this year. I'm like, I don't know yet what I'm going to put in for this year, but we were kind of joking about this because I just drew a big group of us have been putting in for river permits for rafting
Mm.
on the main salmon, the Middle Fork, in the Snake River for years and years and years, like a big group of our friends. And those also have terrible draw odds. And none of
Mhm.
us have been drawing anything for that for years. And then I drew 2 permits for
That's
both the snake and the salmon this year. And so I'm like, okay, I got to put in for something good
wow. Yeah, you
because I'm on a
better.
lucky streak right now in this 12-month period. So,
That's
yep.
wild. So Ben,
Lily's
you
wife.
said you had the tag a few years prior, the same exact goat tag?
I did, yeah, same unit in 2019. And I will say, like, people listening might be like, "Oh, you've had it before." Like, of course, like, you influence that hunt, but I will say, like, on it was honestly like two very different experiences. Like, we hunted completely different locations in the unit, and where we were able to actually find Lily's goat scouting was in an area that I never even made it to in any of my scouting trips or during my hunt. And it was a particular spot where some of the biologists had kind of like referred me to, and I had the tag, but being stubborn, I had like scouted other areas and seen goats. I never actually made it in there. And boy, we're sure glad that we did,
Yeah.
for obvious reasons. So
Were you just in total disbelief, Lily, when those results came out?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I never draw anything. And so when I just pulled it up on my phone, because we're getting group texts, everyone's like, the results are out. And
Yeah.
so I pull up my phone, go online and look, and it's like successful. I was like, excuse me, what? Because I just didn't expect that, and then it's funny because it's released in June, and then at that point it's kind of game on, right? Like
Right.
you've got to
It
figure
happens
out,
quick.
okay, what's my gear going to look like? Where are we going to go? And you just kind of have to dive in. And then, the challenge too is you're coming up into summer, which for a lot of us gets booked up pretty fast, right? Friends, family, weekend events, things like that. So very limited weekends, preset or things that we've already been obligated to for trips. And so then it's like, okay, we got to figure out what weekends we can go. Because the area we were hunting is about 4.5 hours from our house. So it's not necessarily like a super close unit where we can just like pop over after work and do like an evening scout. So there definitely are some logistics involved with doing that. And then kind of we just really had to like weekend warrior it with that because there, like I said, limited time, work, everything else. We just had to kind of suck it up and like drive down in the evening on a Friday and do our scouting on the weekends. And then, we were burning 20 plus miles in a weekend and then heading home and going back to work on Monday.
Yeah. How many weekends about like between drawing and then opening day do you think you got out for these little bonsai scouting trips?
We had we did 3 total weekends, so not like a ton.
Yeah.
That includes the weekend too that we was the scout turned into the actual hunt as well.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Did you when you so you draw this tag, mountain goats, have a mystique both in terms of the animals, and then it's this once in a lifetime opportunity, and then this reputation for being, tough country, kind of a next level hunt. I mean, you have great
Oh yeah.
hunting experience. You grew up in the outdoors. At this point, you've killed, like you said, a bunch of big game, which by the way, that's amazing. Kudos. You've killed bear and elk and all that. So I mean, you're not coming into this like completely baseline by any means. You have great experience, but did you still feel any intimidation or nerves
Yeah,
or what have you about this type of experience?
there's definitely some trepidation there because and to be clear, yeah, I definitely feel really good about elk hunting. I've kind of found an area that I really, really like, which is part of the reason I've been able to free up that opportunity of like not putting in for like premium elk tags because I've been really happy with the general season unit I've been hunting in. But it's all been, wall tent camp and just long day hikes and things like that. I've actually never backpacked hunted until this time. So that was
Ah,
entirely new for me. The country we were in, I was familiar with, very rugged, but the concept of not being able to go back to the wall tent
yeah.
and trying to figure out logistics of like what I'm going to bring and getting more familiar with backpack hunting. And I also had really minimal backpacking experience. Just in general, like I had done like maybe 2 or 3 like little weekend backpacking trips in the summer just for fun in the past, but I
Hmm.
definitely am not like a heavy backpacker by any means. So I do not um, have a ton of comfortability with that prior to this opportunity. So I definitely had to start figuring out, okay, how, what is my pack going to look like? What am I going to bring? It kind of leads you into like what is most important to you in your pack. And so those are things that I had to really consider. And then the challenge is weather too. Like we're up over 7,000 feet, and looking at going, I initially was like, okay, I'm going to go in October, like second week of October. So you're trying to determine, okay, what do I need in my pack for weather? I went out, we got a bunch of down. I got a new sleeping bag. I got a new sleeping pad, and down pants and micro spikes and like all this gear. In the kind of the irony of the situation is I didn't end up using most of it by the time I harvested my goat. But I really it was a good lesson to kind of learn a little bit more about myself and like what I need when I'm backpacking, I think.
Yeah, you mentioned a few things there. I was curious, like as you said that, like going from minor backpacking experience to now backpack hunting, and then looking at this terrain, October being the time of year, at least initially. And gosh, there can be so much variability on what the second week of October looks like in the Idaho
Oh
mountains.
yeah.
I mean, it could be 60 and it could be 6 inches of snow or 2 feet. I mean,
Correct.
there's just so much variability. Um, yeah, so it sounds like that mostly focused on like, hey, stay warm, have good clothing, and then be able to sleep well, essentially, right? Like you said, kind of like
That's
upgrading
Yep.
sleeping bag and stuff.
You nailed it, because that's we were talking to some friends about backpacking the other night, and like what's important to us. And it's funny to hear the difference with the guys. They're like, I got to make sure I don't run out of food, and I'm like, I got to make sure I'm not sleeping on rocks. And
Yeah.
so we are definitely very different in like what's important to us, and like being able to sleep well and staying warm. And I had a friend over as well, and she does some backpacking, and she 100% agreed with me. She was like, stay warm. And so it's funny how you see people's priorities differ, because I think when people do research and try to plan these things, you get a lot of feedback, but at the end of the day you really have to determine like what is going to make you most comfortable in there. What are your top priority items? And they do vary a little bit for people. I mean, obviously your baseline, like good gear, right? But
Hmm.
then it's like, okay, what is most important? Do I need to bring in a sleeping pad that weighs over a pound? Probably not, but I like it because it's huge and I sleep really well on it. But for
Hmm.
some people, they're like, you're crazy. I'm going to sleep on this thin thermarest. And that's good enough for me, but everyone has different priorities. And I think you really have to assess what's going to make you most comfortable in those situations, because they are uncomfortable situations. So however you can improve that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. What we've obviously talked a ton about footwear. People are probably sick of hearing about footwear. It's rare I get to speak with women though. Like what works for you? Or have you figured that out yet in terms of hunting, whether it's your elk hunt, whether it's this goat hunt, maybe that did or didn't change, but tell me about boots or footwear that works
Yeah.
for you.
So I started in a pair of Loas actually when I very first started hunting, and they were a little heavy for me. And then I switched to the Solomon. What are they?
Quest
The
40s.
Quest 40s, yeah. And I've run two pairs of those, and I really like them. I do find that there is a little bit of a like I want to call it. I guess it's a quality issue, but they do tend to start splitting, and the waterproofing kind of starts to fail after really heavy use for a couple of years.
Hmm.
But they are by far, for me, the footbed is the most comfortable footbed. I don't have sore feet at the end of the day. I really don't have issues with blistering. And then I started experimenting with a pair of Mammut boots this year. But so I'm kind of playing around a little bit, and I'm even like considering maybe jumping over and jumping on the Crispy train and trying a pair of those as well. But the Solomons have worked really well for me for years in terms of like foot comfort, and being able to do really really long days and not have aching feet at the end of the day, like have the arch support and
Hmm.
no blisters or anything like that. So, and they're light, which I like, but
Yeah.
it footwear is one of those things that is, again, it's so specific to the person, and everyone's feet are so different. It's hard to do like a one size fits all for everybody. They just have to kind of go out and test it out, and either they're going to come back with sore feet and blisters, or it's going to work great for them.
That's interesting to hear your experience with the Quest 4Ds. I mean, it's been my case as well. It's like these are the best boot ever for a little while. They're just
Right.
like the waterproofing and durability and
Yep.
and all that's not there. Ben,
Yep.
so Lily finds out that she draws. You've been in this unit, as you said before, like you guys ended up hunting a different area, but you having experience obviously has to influence day one, I'm assuming, of scouting, or how much other, like, hey, this was 2019, this was years ago, like let's start from scratch and kind of reevaluate a plan. How much did you rely on your previous intel versus looking at this whole thing with fresh eyes, basically?
No, for sure. I mean, you just heard a big piece of like the gear decision. So my hunt was like completely opposite weather-wise. And so everything Lily heard about it was like freezing, like temps in the teens in mid-October, early October. And then I actually had a lot of snow. So, you know, there's obviously, Lily not having backpack hunted, like wants to stay warm. There's a lot of conversations about like snow, access, etc. But I'd say really like, one thing about Lily and just like couples hunting is like she wants to do stuff her own way. So like I think we kind of hit the drawing boards like pretty fresh. Like, yes, I had really good experience in the unit, knew how to access it, knew all the trail system, like how to get where. And I think initially I was like, I, there's this area where like the biologist tipped me off to this area. I actually had met a couple guys on during my hunt that had harvested a goat in that area, and like let's go check this out. And so really like we planned our first scouting trip in July, just into a completely to like bonsai trip. It's an 8.5 mile hike into this area. Like have no idea if we're going to see anything at all. And ironically, and we took a couple friends, went on a backpacking trip. It was a fun time. And it's like, ironically, we saw one goat in there, and there was like no other goats around at all. And it happened to be the one that Lily ended up taking. But it was funny because at that time, we're like, oh, that looks like a really mature Billy. But like, unless you've seen like a bunch of them, it doesn't really like put it into perspective, like the size. And Mark, you
Hmm.
probably know just as well as we do, like having been on goat hunts, it's like you almost have to look at a few billies to really know. Like, we were looking at a record book Billy, we like kind of had no idea that he was truly that special.
Yeah, it's so wild how, like, the difference between an average Billy, a good Billy, and a great Billy. But even those great Billies, as you said, it's like it's in comparison. And it can be hard to really get a judge for it unless you've really been looking over a lot of goats for sure. And even then, it's like sometimes in optics, like it's so deceiving, whether you're looking at body size, trying to judge maturity, looking just at horns, like it can be tough unless you have these direct comparisons and then a lot of experience to go with that. Man, they're difficult animals at times to judge. Like everybody just focuses on judging between a nanny and a billy, which that's its own like eye that you have to train for and understand. But then when you start judging quality or age of billies and size, like it's tough, man.
It is. It's that was one of the biggest challenges, bar none, on this. It was, you know, elk hunting. It's like, okay, that's a large bull. That's a
No denying
raghorn,
it.
right? Like it's
Yeah.
really obvious. Not only getting, determining sex on the mountain goats, which I think when they're furrier, when you've got older nannies, I think that can, be more challenging. Fortunately, the nannies we saw, it was fairly obvious. But we did end up going another time when we didn't see the same initial Billy, and we did see some others. And it was kind of interesting. I remember we found one and we watched him for a while through the spotter, and he was in a spot that was very accessible to get to if we were interested in shooting him. And he had a tank of a body, and we were kind of watching him. He moved around, popped out of bed, and then went to lay down. And he was kind of bobbing his head, looking around back and forth. And we kind of watched him for a minute. And we were like, you know what? I think he's broomed off like half his horn on one side. And that's also kind of the moment too for me where I was like, this is a trophy hunt. It kind of hadn't really settled in yet, because it was like you
Yeah.
get this once in a lifetime opportunity, right? And you really want a certain class of Billy, but being being primarily an elk hunter, and I've shot okay, decent bulls, but not anything like huge. And I'm usually more of just like, I like to eat elk. So,
Yeah.
if I can get one on the ground, then I'm pretty happy. But this was the first time that really occurred to me that I was like, I'm trophy hunting, and we've got to pass on this Billy because he just, the horns aren't there. And so that was kind of the first time that occurred to me. And then, it's just very different. And I think for some people, maybe that transition from just hunting, to put meat in the freezer is to, trophy hunting is kind of an easy progression. And I think it maybe doesn't strike everyone as like, oh, this is different, but you're pursuing an animal, right, for the trophy. It's no longer about just like, oh, I want to eat goat meat, right? And so, not to say I haven't, because we've been crock potting it and it's been pretty good, but
Yeah.
but outside of that, that's the first time it occurred to me that we were looking for something really special.
Did you have more feelings about that when it occurred to you? Or was it just kind of like matter of fact, like, oh no, this is a trophy hunt? Or was that anything you kind of like had to like process?
It was a little bit of a little emotional process, just in terms of um it just changes your perspective, right? Like I when I elk hunt, it's like I'm so thankful. I've worked super hard to get here and to get this opportunity. And now I have this elk on the ground and I'm taking all of this great meat home. And I have so much appreciation for that. And then now I'm pursuing an animal basically for what's on its head, right? And it changes it's a weird thing to try and digest, I think. And maybe some people, like I said, it's no big deal and they just kind of breeze over that. But I do think it's worth mentioning, because there probably are people out there who have that same kind of realization when you're moving into a space where you are actually pursuing game specifically for the trophy aspect. And it definitely changes the way you look at things. And I think you still regard the animal in the same way. But at the same time, for me, it was like, I'm going to work my ass off and I want to do this animal justice, whatever animal I end up getting. And I want it to be something really special. But then, there's also the side of it of like, you're taking an older Billy. And in my case, it was aged about 10 years old with the fishing game biologist. And, they're kind of getting past their prime breeding years. And you don't feel like I'm, maybe this is a justification in my head, but like, I'm not taking, a young Billy or a nanny or like causing detriment to the overall population here. And again, it's a very limited tag, but yeah, there's definitely like a little bit of a have an internal conversation with yourself when you're like, okay, this is for a different purpose.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it is, especially, I don't know, when you learn more about mountain goats in particular too, like what you just mentioned about age and breeding. And I mean, there's a reason in the vast majority of instances, like nannies are off the table. You're encouraged to shoot older billies. Like they definitely have a unique, not only population, but they have unique uh, breeding behavior, kind of like life cycle and reproduction rate as well.
Right.
So it definitely is a species where the more you learn about them, it's like, yeah, okay, it is about the trophy in a sense in inches, but it's also, there's definitely, I feel like there's a stronger, I don't want to say a stronger case, but like a stronger argument to be made of killing as old of an animal as possible in a mountain goat compared to a mule deer, an elk, what have you. Not to
Right.
say that that's not relevant or important or whatever,
Right.
but that whole age class perspective is definitely different when you look at just the population and the dynamics of mountain goats.
Yeah, I would say, the in Idaho, you have to take your mandatory goat gender identification course prior to picking up your tag. And it's really interesting when you're going through the video and they're basically talking about like the detriment to the population if you were to take out a nanny. And how significant that impact is, but then also the sexual maturity on a nanny. I think it's like 4 years old or something like that. It's older, whereas a lot of species can start reproducing by 2 years old. It's a lot later for goats. So that's why I think, in the conservation space, they have to be so cognizant of what their impact is on those herds to be able to maintain them. And that was really interesting, I think, learning about them. And they're just such a unique animal. And I think that's what fascinates everyone about mountain goats, is because you don't get to see them every day, right? And they're just an odd little funny little animal when you watch them, but they're fun to watch. Like, it's so fun to watch them. We're, like I said, in an area that is a lot of backpackers use. So when you're down in kind of the backpacking camps around lakes, there's tons of nannies and kids, and they're just hilarious to like watch them run around and there's the shenanigans that they get into, and bugging all the backpackers and people having to string their packs up in trees because the goats are going to go like bust into their backpacks and steal their granola bars. And they're just a really cool animal. So learning more about them was a really fun opportunity. And, I think that they're unique, and it's fun to pursue such a unique animal and in such a rugged place.
Yeah, for sure. I was on a elk hunt in Idaho and it was kind of glassing for elk and saw some goats way off in the distance as I was glassing. And I legit just got like so distracted by watching them that I forgot I was on an elk hunt. I was like, oh, I should
Yeah.
probably start. It's probably been too long that I've just been enjoying watching these goats and observing their behavior and like where they're at on the mountain. And I was like, I should probably, it was kind of like prime time to be looking for elk. And I was like, I should probably start looking for smoke right now.
Oh yeah, they're funny, and like, you see them in a lot of backpacking areas, and you get the opportunity to be like probably way too close to them, to the point where sometimes you gotta like huck rocks over their way to like shoo them off because they'll try and harass you. But they are so funny. And then I think once you get some of that familiarity with them, when you actually see the solitary billies, the really big kind of loners out there, that's when you start realizing like that's a really special opportunity to be able to pursue one of those animals. And that's kind of where we ended up when we started seeing some billies. I think that was like our second time scouting, when we didn't see that original billy again that we thought was really nice. We did see some others though, and that's when it starts to dawn on you a little bit. The first one we saw was really nice, and I think you get fixated a little bit. And that was the challenge for me, was not getting too much of tunnel vision, because you see one and you're like, okay, this is a really nice billy, and then you're like, but I haven't seen a lot of really nice billies. So, am I just kind of fixating on this one too much, or what do I need to do to kind of determine whether or not this is the one that's like, I'm going to go after this one? And so then when we saw some more billies, we were like, oh, they're pretty nice, they just didn't compare. And then I really fixated on that one. And I was like going back and looking at all our spotting scope pictures every other day and like zooming in on it. And I definitely did get fixated on this one goat. And then when you go back in again, and you don't see them, then you're like, oh no, like, did they get shot? Like, what happened? And so I was like calling Fish and Game. I was like, has anybody harvested a goat in this unit? Kind of like panicking, because even though he was in a spot where I highly doubt anyone would find him,
He was gone.
yeah, we couldn't find him
Yeah.
again.
So
And so,
you found him on your first scouting trip. You had some
yep.
other scouting trips. You're seeing other goats. You
Uh-huh.
decide, hey, this original goat is, I don't want to say the one, but it's the best goat we've seen. And then you're trying to relocate him.
Yep.
And then, like you said, it sounds like, so then the season opens though, because you said you're nervous that someone else may have taken him.
Yeah.
Yep.
How many
Yeah.
times did you go back in and try and relocate him, whether it was in scouting or at this point when season had opened?
Twice, because we had gone in originally and we found him. Then we wanted to go in again, and I was like, I want to see some other billies, but also I want to relocate this one goat. And to be kind of like break down the timeline a little bit, we started scouting in July, and then we had a lot of like just family obligations, trips, things like that going on. So we didn't get back in there until Labor Day weekend to try and find a goat again. So it had been, 6 weeks or something since we had last been in there. So it had been some time. And then we didn't see him that weekend, but we saw some other billies. And then the season opened on August 31st. So I mean, by Labor Day weekend, it was technically open, but I didn't bring a rifle or anything. We were just trying to relocate him and see what else was out there. And then we couldn't go again until the very end of September. So there was very limited time that we actually got to spend out there. But I mean, we were going in 8.5 miles, which was taking us a little over 3 hours. And a lot of times we were going in on like a Friday evening. And so we were mostly hiking in the dark with headlamps for 3 hours to get in there to the spot that we were scouting. And so it was definitely an aggressive sin to get into that area, but we were pretty determined to try and relocate that one guy.
It was funny too, back to like Mark, you're asking about how like my hunt like might have steered Lily's a little bit. When she got the tag, I was like, so what are your goals for the hunt? She's like, well, I want to kill a really big one. I want it to have like really good fur and just like really lofty goals, which you're just like, okay, like that's awesome. Is that achievable? We have no idea. And we would look at what I thought was like a really respectable, mature Billy, and Lily's like, oh, it's okay. so, and so like we could have went in on August 31st and like, sure, you can harvest a goat when it's 65 degrees outside and it's really nice weather and all that. But like, Willie didn't want one that looked like you took a Phillips Norelco, shaver to it. And it's like by waiting until like end of September into October, like where they start to put on the fur, that's why we were like still scouting through September. Ideally trying goats out are cool for the horns, but they also get that really nice shaggy fur. So we were wanting that to grow in as well.
Yeah, I would struggle to hunt like a goat, a tennis ball, like August goat, because the fur is so amazing.
It is, yeah. That was one of those things I think that, and I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but based on when we ended up harvesting him, which I think the whole theme throughout this entire experience has been learning how to embrace the unexpected between, throwing in on this low draw tag and just forgetting about it because I'm like, I'm not going to draw this. And then I draw the tag, right? And then it's like, okay, I got to figure out how to backpack hunt now. And then going in and finding this really nice goat and kind of fixating on that and then not being able to find him again. And then in my head, I just saw this like little bit of snow on the ground, like cold hunt. The goats have these nice coats, and I ended up shooting a billy, and it was like in the 50s or low 60s that day when I shot him, and so I was in a t-shirt. I mean, that is not what I expected at all. I did not expect to harvest a goat in a t-shirt. Yeah. And I don't know how many people do that, but it was just not what aligned with what was in my head.
And what was the date roughly?
It was the 28th of September. It was actually National Public Lands Day.
Oh, perfect.
Which was kind of cool. Yeah, so it was the end of September, and I had expected to go in October. And again, like you mentioned earlier, in Idaho, in October, I mean, normally I'm elk hunting by around the second week of October. So yeah, I mean, I've seen it where we're like stressed about the elk meat because we shoot one on opening day and it's like 72 degrees out. And then we've had other times where it's snowed overnight and there's like 6 inches of snow around the wall tent. And so you just don't know what you're going to end up with in October. But that was the premise of everything, was like, I'm going to get this goat with this beautiful coat in October. But that's not quite what happened. He didn't have, the long full coat. He wasn't by any means like shaggy or, short coated, but he certainly wasn't that like what you would get in like late October kind of coat. But it's also hard to, really look down on a hunt like that when you've got that class of billy, right? That is measuring over 50 inches. It's like, how do you also like pass up on the opportunity for something like that, even though maybe 100%. The conditions aren't what you expected, right?
And it's a huge gamble like you can't even compare, like the goats I've hunted in Alaska compared to having this opportunity in Idaho because one, like the hair develops quicker in Alaska, they're just
Right.
further north, right? And you can run into access issues and the later in the season you get like on our most recent goat hunt, like we definitely had issues obviously with the river and both getting in and getting out and it's limiting, but even more so on some of these Idaho hunts. I mean, you wait and you're trying to wait for this hair and you're trying to push it off, but again, the weather can totally change, which can totally mess with access, much less goat behavior. And then I mean, you could try and put off these Idaho hunts waiting for the best fur, and then weather and goats could just make you not have a tag or not have an opportunity, right? So I mean, there's a real kind of like gamble slash risk to this
Oh,
timing.
big time. Hugely. Yeah. We were talking about that because Ben went. So I was planning to go right the second week of October. I was like, I feel like that's, I'm very familiar with the weather in this area and how that risk that you're running with that. But we got the micro spikes, we got all the down. We're like, okay, we're gonna try to get
TP
in
tent
there.
and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're planning that it might get really cold and snowy to go in there, but that's kind of what we had in our heads. And then Ben's hunt back in 2018, he went the first weekend of October and he had a bunch of snow. I think it was in the like teens
Yeah.
one morning. So it was pretty cold. And, that would have been 5 to 6 days after, I'm obviously in 2019, but time of year, it would have been 5 to 6 days after the timeline of when I shot mine this last year. So, and it was like low 60s for me. So it shows you how variable that weather can be, especially when you're at higher elevations like that. And so that was definitely a huge factor is like, I want that coat, but like at what cost, right? Like, what if we just can't even, because like I said, we were 8.5 miles backpacked in. We had gone through a lot of terrain. There's a lot of steep, long climbs in there that are tough on good weather days. And so, you think about doing that with a heavy pack on your back and frozen snow over the rocks and the scree and and it
Yeah,
starts to sound a little more treacherous.
for sure. I get, yeah, I keep asking so many questions. Let's dive into the hunt and how things go down, relocating the goat and getting it done.
Yeah. So like I said, we had scouted um and we did a big backpacking loop with friends back in July, and that's when we saw like one Billy early on, and that was kind of cool off the trail. And then of course all the nannies and kids in camp and things like that. And then we split off with our friends, and then eventually came around to the spot where we all met back up and camped, and we were up on a big knoll doing some glassing so we could look off of both sides. And it was actually one of our friends, Tom, that ended up spotting the Billy that I ended up shooting across a couple of lakes. And um, we had been looking over the other side, and Ben and I weren't seeing anything. And then Tom's just like, I gotta go. So, we're all excited. We turn around, get the spotter on him, and we were really fortunate actually to see him in hindsight because of where he was tucked back. But he had just taken a little dirt bath and was shaking off and kind of like looking out over the lakes, which was a really cool. We got some cool photos of him doing that, and really got a good opportunity. We not only were able to determine that he was a Billy, but also really see the horns on him. Especially that time of year is kind of nice because they are shed out. So you don't have the distraction of like a big billowy coat to kind of like consume some of that horn when you're trying to determine like, is what class of Billy am I looking at? So that was when we first saw that one, and we were all feeling like really good about that goat. But again, like trying to avoid tunnel vision of, okay, we've seen one, potentially nice Billy. We should see some more before we like um, necessarily go after that. So that's when we, like I said, there was a gap of time because of just stuff going on in the summer. We'd already been obligated to, and then ended up going back in over Labor Day weekend. And we saw a number of other Billies. And again, that's where I saw the one with the like broomed off horn on one side. We saw a couple of others. And we felt pretty good about them, in terms of it looked like decent billies. But I think part of the reason that we were also fixated on that original one we saw in July is the fact that we had been able to see him at a little bit closer distance than some of the others, which is always nice just because you get a better look at him. Um, and then we were kind of looking at the next weekend we'd be able to go, and that would be the last weekend of September. And I was like, okay, this is going to be our last scout before we go for the hunt in October, which I had already, taken off of work for a week. We had all this gear. We're like ready to go for the second week of October. And then Ben and I had been kind of debating on it, and I was like, well, we'll take the rifle for a hike,
100%. I mean, we spent 3 days, like Lily said, we saw a lot of other billies on Labor Day, but we spent 3 days in essentially the same glassing spot trying to find this goat and never saw him.
Wow.
So it was like, I remember like the drive home, and we're just like, hey, like the next scouting trip, like, Lil, maybe you take the gun. It doesn't even come off the pack unless we find that one. Like, we don't even think about any other goats until you're into your October hunt. But like, if we see that one and it's a good opportunity, like, we just weren't sure. Where did he go? Did he move on? Did someone else shoot him? Like, is he going to a different breeding area? Like, all my research on goats said no, like he should still be in that same area. But that was just a huge question mark. So that was the decision, what Lily's talking about, where it's like, if we're going to go in there again, we're going to make the pull, we're going to hike in 8.5 miles in the dark, you're going to bring a rifle, but like, we're not even going to think about it unless we see him.
Yeah. And it was kind of funny too, because again, you're going back to kind of just everything was unexpected. Mentally, I'm like, okay, this is a scouting trip, right? Where I'm bringing the rifle on a hike, but this is a scouting trip. So like we hike in on a Friday night, and again, we're just weekend warrioring. Like we're hiking in on Friday, we're coming out on Sunday, and so I'm tired. Like we worked all day Friday, and then we drove 4.5 hours down to the trailhead and then hiked in over 3 hours in the dark with headlamps. And so I'm like, I'm going to sleep in the morning. And so I slept in.
Like, I don't know. The couples dynamic is always interesting, right? And it's like, so like I'm up at the crack of dawn. I've like glassed everything with my binos. I've like got the spotting scope out, like glassed everything from camp. I'm on my second cup of coffee with the Jetboil. I've had breakfast. I went to the bathroom.
Yeah.
I'm now digging into my snacks, and the sun is up, and I'm like, Lily's still in the tent. I'm like, what are we doing?
Like the Brad Paisley song, Waiting on a Woman.
That's right. Well, I mean, I had that comfy sleep system, right? Like I had that big down sleeping bag. I just gotten in this like thick 4-inch sleeping pad. So I was good. But yeah, I mean, that just kind of tells you like we were in hunt mode, right? Like we were in scout mode. So that to me, I was like, okay, there's not a lot of pressure to like get up super early, but also and I'm sure you can attest to too from your experiences, is another kind of unique feature about goats is they aren't on anybody's schedule. Like elk, you do have to be up really early and catch them, especially it gets tricky once, it's a full moon and they're out at feeding at night. But regardless, you still need to, that kind of dawn and sunset, those time periods, dawn and dusk with elk is kind of the golden rule, right? And so you really need to make sure you're in your location that you're scouting for elk during those times of day when it's kind of just dead space in the middle of the day. Goats are out all the time. So, I mean, we see them napping like one of my dogs out in the sun, where we saw one weekend and we were like, is that goat dead? Like, did somebody wound it? Because it was just passed out on its side on like this little rocky outcropping. And we were just watching it, and it finally like got up kind of dazed, just like a big dog laying in the yard. And it kind of cracked us up. But yeah, they aren't on anybody's schedule. And so they're out all the time. And they sleep when they want to sleep. And I like that about them because I'm the same way sometimes. So we had kind of that morning, like Ben said, I wasn't in a rush to get up. And we got up, we went up to that same glassing knoll we had been on before, and started looking around. And we had made a game plan too, because we were like, we need to find this guy. We're going to go over in this spot and look off of these different ridges. And then we're going to go over here and try to get kind of a vantage so we can look off these cliff faces. So we had a plan of all these different places we were going to hit throughout the day to try and relocate him. And again, just like things didn't exactly go his plan in a good way. But we went up our first ridge we were planning to kind of like look off of both sides of. We climb up there, and then it ended up that there was kind of this little finger that bisected a big canyon. So you could look off of both sides, both the side we had seen him previously and then off the other side. And it's like, well, they kind of stay in the same areas. So he may have just like climbed over the ridge and gone down to the other side or something like that. So Ben's kind of at the top there, and I walked past him and was like, okay, that bench looks pretty good right below us. So I'm going to go down there. And Ben's like, I'm going to stay up here and glass. So I get down to that bench, and then, it's like the never ending story. Then I'm like, that bench right below here actually looks a little better. So I'm going to go down to that one. And then, I go to the next one. I was like, yeah, now I'm starting to get a really good vantage, because you're getting, as you're dropping in that finger, you're getting into the canyon a little bit more, just provides a little bit better visual opportunity. So I get down to that one, and then I see another one, and I was like, nah, that's a good bench. So I dropped down to that one. And that's when I was like, okay, well, this is a cliff, so I'm not dropping down any further. And got there and, sat down and pulled the binos out and was just kind of like looking. I had a really good like peripheral of the whole canyon area. So I am looking through my binos. And at that point too, like, again, having like fixated on this goat, having called Fish and Game and asked them if anybody has shot a goat. And you're just like almost willing that thing to manifest in your binoculars, and I'm sure that a lot of hunters have been there before. When they fixated on an animal, you're just like, you want any of those like white rocks in the sun to be your goat, right? Mm-hmm. And so I was very fixated on it. So looking around, don't see anything. And then I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to get up and go find Ben. So I put my hand down, and I'm right in front of like a huge cliff drop, and it's probably like a 45-foot drop on this cliff. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to be really careful standing up. So I put my hand down to stand up, and I look just past my hand down below to the bottom of this cliff face, and there's a goat bedded. And I was like, whoa, okay, that's a goat. And so that's when, the adrenaline starts going and your heart starts racing a little bit, because he was that right in that same area that we had seen him before. But then again, I'm like, okay, I don't know if it's the same goat. I don't want to, jump to conclusions. So that's when my heart starts racing, and I like get up, and then I'm, clambering back up the ridge. And Ben, I don't know if you want to maybe add a little bit about your thoughts when I was going all the way down that.
Yeah, I was like, Lily's like dropping to the bottom of the canyon, and I'm like, what? Like, where are you going? Like, and then she like, of course, she finds it all on her own, and it's awesome in that respect. It's not like, oh, Ben brought me in there and Ben glassed it. It's like, no, like she did it all on her own, which is really cool.
Yeah, I was scrambling back up there like, Ben.
And how far, like when you spotted it, how far was it?
140 yards.
Yeah, it was close.
Wow.
Yeah, so, he was just below. We were on the top of this big cliff, like she was saying, and he was just bedded right underneath it, like a 45-degree angle down, just right below us.
So. Yeah, wow. It was crazy when we, because you're expecting to see this thing like across a canyon or a ways away, where you're like, okay, we got to figure out how to get to him, right? And then to just be like looking around up here, and then you just like put your hand down, you go to stand up, and you look down, and there's that goat right below you. Is just it. I mean, it's such an experience, and just again, like the adrenaline, and your heart starts racing, because you've just not only found that goat that you've been looking for, but he is right there. And that was a really exciting moment. And then, and then I go get Ben, and then it's like, okay, but now how am I going to shoot him?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like we're like, shaking with excitement, like, is this the one? I mean, but
Yeah.
there's no other goats in this
No,
whole
yeah.
area. So it's like, how can it not be him? Get the spotter out, get it zoomed. It's just like through my binos. I mean, you just look at it for 2 seconds. You're like, this is so obviously just a absolute monster mountain goat. But of course, get the spotter on him. Look, it's like, yeah, I mean, Lil, this is him for sure. And
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it came to trying to figure out how to set up for that shot,
Yeah.
which was a challenge.
yeah, the shot was it was a 45-degree incline straight down. So like we really struggled to even get into a position, like you couldn't shoot prone, and if you were shooting prone, you'd be like leaning off the edge of this cliff, so it's like super sketchy. And we were able, it probably took honestly 10 or 15 minutes, which sounds embarrassing, but like
No,
to
at
like
least we were
to
messing
get
around up there.
to get into a spot where like Lily could get the gun on him comfortably. And
Hmm.
he's obviously in his bed chewing cud, so like he's not going anywhere, but like you're nervous about, like, do you kick a rock down and spook him, or does he wind you, or I mean all of those things, right? And there was quite a few like dead trees and things obstructing too, so it wasn't like it wasn't a gimme that we were even going to get a shot at him. And so I think once Lily got set up to shoot, we were like, okay, we're going to wait. We're not going to shoot him in his bed. We're going to wait for him to stand and get like a clean shot. Lily wanted like an ethical shot. And we talked a lot about like shot placement on goats. Like Lily's shot a lot of elk, but like everything from my understanding on goats is like you want to anchor them, because I mean, if you long shoot them, that's great, they're going to die, but maybe they run up in the cliffs, they get into a spot that's super nasty, you can't retrieve them, or it's super dangerous. They've been known to jump off cliffs and like obliterate themselves. And so the shot placement that we discussed was more forward on the shoulder. Ideally, if you can break both shoulders, like that's number one. And to do that, depending on the angle of the shot, I mean, you got to hit something like really the size of a softball. So it's not easy. You're on a primitive rest, you're shooting downhill. And when that goat stood up, obviously your heart's racing. Like I know Lily, like, I mean, you have 5 months, you're waiting for this moment. You've been wondering where this goat, like, where is he at? All of a sudden, he's 140 yards from you. And he stands up, gives a little window through the trees right on the shoulder, and she just puts the bullet through both of his shoulders and drops him right there.
Dang.
Yeah, it was we had to wait for him to stand up. It was an interesting, so kind of to tell you how I had to shoot this thing. Like Ben said, I couldn't get prone. So there was kind of this, granite cliff that we were on. And there was this section that almost made like a chair seat. So I was able to like sit and then basically turn my upper body like 180 degree or 90 degrees, I'm sorry, and aim the rifle down. So, and I had one knee up. So I was like resting my elbow on my knee. And then, with the 45-degree angle, you're just pointing down, right? Like just almost
Hmm.
straight down with the rifle. So, but that was how I was most comfortable. And that is, huge. I think really that for any hunter, but I would say especially females, like getting comfortable in the shooting position, because to be honest with you, like being prone, they say, is the most steady. But it's not often very comfortable for me. And a lot of times because, females, like if they're smaller, especially with a pack, you can have your back really arched if you're shooting off of a pack. It can be awkward. So, really being comfortable, I think, is number one when it comes to that. And I was really steady and I was really comfortable, even though it was kind of a funky, like sitting in a chair type position where I
Yeah.
was turned to the side. But that's what worked for me. And then again, you're shooting straight down, so you really can't. You really don't have a lot of different opportunities. So you got to get a little bit creative there on that.
Had you, I mean, again, you've killed bears and elk and all that, but probably not from a position quite like that. Have you
No.
purposely practiced differently, just going into this goat hunt and knowing that, terrain is different, shot opportunities may look different?
Not anything special. I mean, same as I would for elk season, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Which is generally I'm shooting like prone or I'm like at a table at the range, shooting. And then I've also practiced shooting off sticks before because I've done that with a few elk. So
Hmm.
that is another way that I have shot that's comfortable and is a great way to shoot in the field, especially when some of the elk I've shot have been under 200 yards or even under 100 yards. And so in those situations, you really don't have um, time to be getting, messing around too much. So getting comfortable shooting off sticks, I think, can be really, really beneficial, or I should say trekking poles, not sticks, but just to be clear. But shooting off of trekking poles and like an X is really, really helpful when you do get into some of those opportunities where you're really close to an animal and you don't have time to do what we did, which is basically move around on top of this like cliff face and figure out how we're going to get position and all that. So we were lucky that we had the cover we did where he couldn't see us and the wind was right. So we were able to get set up like that. But yeah, I think there is a lot to be said for learning how to shoot in different ways because you aren't going to be able to take a perfect thrown out shot every single time.
And just
Yeah.
being comfortable with your rifle. I mean,
Yeah.
Lily's,
Big time.
very, very comfortable. I mean, shoots a 280 Remington. It's nothing like super crazy, right? But it's lethal. It doesn't recoil super hard. She can shoot it well. And so I think
Light to
that's
pack. Yeah.
it's light to pack. Yeah, a big aspect too. So
Yeah. Great. Awesome. You said pretty much did anchor them, like went well?
Yeah, it went through the shoulders and he flopped down on his side. I mean, it was like a linebacker taking him out. So he was
Yeah.
not going anywhere. And so I was really glad that we were able to pin him because again, it was basically we had like a forked branch from a tree kind of between me and him. So it was kind of waiting for him to stand up and get sort of broadside, but again, you're not perfect broadside because you're at that angle where he's so far below you. So it's not like you're coming in straight. But there was that opening between the forked branches where it was like, again, kind of tricky, but that's the shot that I had. And because he was standing up, he was probably going to bed back down, but that was the best opportunity. And so basically just standing there, or I was positioned and then waiting for him to just kind of stand and give me a really clean shot opportunity. But again, I had to make sure I was comfortable and steady because it was not like Ben said, not a giant target, not a huge opening to shoot through. But I was really glad I was able to take a super clean shot and just pin him there. So
no, it's cool in that moment, and I've been there with Lily a lot of times. But it's like when the click of that safety goes off and your heart's just like racing. I'm just like every time I swear I'm gonna. It's like here we go. I'm gonna end up packing a obscenely heavy pack now.
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
something's going down on the ground.
Yeah. That's so cool.
it was really fun. And then I ended up shooting an elk 2 weeks later, which was, well, I guess 2.5,
Dang.
3 weeks later. So, because I still had that week off, right, in October. So
Right.
we both ended up going elk hunting. So, but yeah, I mean, going back to the goat, that was such a cool experience to be able to. So, once he was down, and we were able to get up to him, it's just that I think anybody who enjoys the outdoors hunting, and getting the opportunity, especially just backcountry hunting, you get the opportunity to not only be in these animals' natural habitat, but be up close to them, especially when they're on the ground like that. And I'm sure for you, like you the first time you've shot a mountain goat, and being able to just walk up to an animal that you otherwise would never get to touch a mountain goat, right? Like, I mean, maybe at a museum you get to pet the coat, right? That everyone gets to go up and pet at the museum, but it's not like you get that opportunity to walk up to an animal like that you've just taken and to be able to just look at them and see the like cloven hooves and kind of pet the coat and just see these animals in that close of a situation. So that was really special for me to be able to, after I shot him, to be able to just kind of spend some time and really like look them over, because you have to soak that in. It's not every day that you get to shoot a mountain goat. So
Yeah.
it is a little bit of a trip being able to be that close to them and look over them. But yeah, it was really something else. And then I couldn't have been happier with obviously the goat that I got. And I think a large component of that, and something that people have mentioned to me too, is sometimes the scent glands at the base of their horns can be really deceiving. He actually had pretty small scent glands. And I think that for some people, it looks, it can look like they have a lot bigger bases than they actually do, just because those scent glands, especially at a distance, it's hard to kind of see that. But he had, I mean, there was a lot of girth at the base of those horns. And so, I guess I thought like, okay, this is a really, really nice mountain goat. And everyone kept telling me that. And I was like, that's awesome. And then they were like, you've got to get this thing scored. And then it wasn't until I was like at the taxidermist, he had somebody coming in who was an official scorer, and so a bunch of people were getting scored, and the taxidermist had some other goats that had been harvested, and so he had this little stack of like skull caps, and I was seeing these little things come in, and I was like, oh my gosh, the goat that I shot is huge. And it did not, again, like you just don't see these things. It's not like an elk where you're like, that's a big elk and that's, a small elk, right? Or a small bull, whatever. So that it's just totally different. And so you're constantly kind of like reassessing like the class of the goat that you've harvested, because you just don't have that comparison, right?
Yeah.
And so that was super cool. And then, we were getting it scored, and Ben's like, what do you think it's going to be, like trying to guess? And I was like, again, I didn't want to like put a number out there on it. And so I thought, it'll score well, but I did not expect it to score over 50 inches. Just like, I mean, I knew it was a sizable goat, but I was, I was elated when I found that out, that it was over 50 inches. And it just kind of solidified everything for me, and the hard work, and, kind of holding out for that one that I really wanted. And again, it's like a once in a lifetime in Idaho. So it's like, you feel really good about what you've accomplished. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen it in person, but just based on the photos, it's easy to see like, oh, this is a great goat. Yeah, just an absolute stud. Awesome, obviously genetics, but age class that goes with it, and mass, and yeah, just a super, super cool goat.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It was a cool, like, I've never gotten anything professionally scored. And like, I just remember being there, and like, they taped the first horn at 25 and 4/16. And I was like, turned to Lily and I was like, congrats, you just killed like literally a Boone and Crockett all-time goat. So they have the 50-inch where you get to go into the book forever, which is all time, and then anything I think it's over 47 is still record book, but your name only sits for 3 years. Yeah,
and above is
so
3 years.
And it was cool. One thing that was really neat about him too, just like nerding out on the scoring a little bit, is he only had 3/16 of the deduction, so that really helped. Like, if you get one horn that's an inch shorter or whatnot, like you could miss it, right? So it's like a few inches on a goat is everything. And so yeah, I mean, 9 and 7/8 on both horns, almost 6-inch bases. Like, no, he's got it all for sure.
Yeah, so cool. I could keep chatting and asking questions and hearing more, but we better wrap this up because otherwise we'll be here all day. Thanks so much for taking the time. Congrats again. Excited to share the story. And yeah, just you guys will have to stay in touch. You guys are out getting after it and doing cool adventures and hunting a bunch. So yeah, definitely stay in touch.
We will. We appreciate you having us. Thanks so much.
Well, that is a wrap on this one, guys. As always, if you have anything for us, you can send an email to podcast@exomountgear.com. It would be great to hear from you. In terms of other things you may be missing, if you're only subscribed to the podcast, we share articles and videos. So you can check out Exo Mountain Gear on YouTube or go to our website. But the best thing you can do is go to exomountaingear.com/newsletter and sign up to receive our email updates. We won't send you any junk, but we will keep you informed with helpful content and occasional updates from Exo as well. You will also be entered to win a K4 pack system automatically when you sign up for our email list. and we pick a new winner every quarter for that. We truly do appreciate all of your support and your feedback and engagement with the podcast. So thanks for tuning in and thanks for staying in touch. We'll talk to you soon.